In the dust-swept valleys of Arizona Territory, 1875, a gang of ruthless outlaws is about to learn the deadliest lesson of their lives. When they stole a prize stallion from what seemed like just another widow's ranch, they thought they'd found an easy mark. They couldn't be more wrong. Sarah Hawkins isn't your typical grieving widow. For 15 years, she was the most legendary sharpshooter in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, known as Angel of Death, a woman who could split a playing card edgewise, get 100 yards, and shoot a dime out of the air before it hit the ground. This isn't just another revenge tale. This is the story of how the West's most notorious horse thieves discovered too late that they'd stolen from the deadliest shot. This side of the Mississippi, a woman who could put a bullet through a man's heart at half a mile and was about to prove it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn painted the Arizona sky in shades of amber and rose as Sarah Hawkins stepped onto her ranch house porch, her father's Winchester cradled in calloused hands. At 42, she still moved with the fluid grace that had made her famous in another life. Her dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was tied back in a practical braid, and her blue eyes constantly scanned the horizon. Old habits that had kept her alive through 15 years of performing death-defying shooting feats. Thunder. Her midnight black stallion nickered softly from the corral. Sarah smiled, checking the rifle's action with practiced ease. The weapon was clean, oiled, perfect, just like every morning for the past 20 years. Some folks in town whispered about the widow who spent each dawn maintaining a rifle she never seemed to use. They didn't understand that for Sarah, the routine wasn't about preparation. It was about remembrance. "Coming, boy!" she called to Thunder, setting the rifle aside to grab the brush. The stallion was more than just a horse. He was the last gift Thomas had given her before the fever took him 3 years ago. A reminder of her husband's understanding that even after she'd hung up her show costume and settled into ranch life, some part of her would always need the thrill of excellence, the pursuit of perfection. Thunder's coat required the same meticulous attention she gave her rifle. As she brushed the stallion's gleaming flanks, Sarah's mind drifted to the letter she'd received yesterday. Buffalo Bill was touring again, asking if she'd consider a return to the show. The crowd still talk about the Angel of Death, he'd written. No one's ever matched your skill with a rifle. Sarah folded the letter away, unopened. That life was behind her now. She'd found peace in this quiet valley, in the rhythms of ranch work and the simplicity of each day's tasks. The woman who could shoot a playing card edgewise at 100 yards, who could hit a tossed coin before it touched the ground, had chosen to become just another hard-working widow trying to keep her late husband's dream alive. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. Hank Wilson, her nearest neighbor, rode up to the fence line, his expression troubled. "Mornin', Sarah. Heard about the Miller place?" Sarah paused in her brushing. "What about it?" "Horse thieves hit it last night, took their best stallion and 2 mares. 3rd ranch this month." Hank's weathered face creased with concern. "Sheriff thinks it's the Carson gang moving into the territory. They're professional horse thieves, Sarah, mean as snakes. You being out here alone, I manage just fine, Hank." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Thunder pressed his nose against her shoulder, sensing her tension. "Just saying, might be wise to move some of your stock closer to town, especially Thunder here. He's probably the finest horse in the territory now." Sarah ran her hand along Thunder's neck, feeling the power in his muscles. "The day I let fear of thieves change how I run my ranch is the day I should quit ranching altogether." Hank sighed, knowing better than to argue. "Well, just be careful. These aren't ordinary rustlers. They've killed 3 men over in Yuma County. No one's even gotten a clean look at them yet." After Hank rode off, Sarah returned to the house, her movements deliberately calm, despite the unease his words had stirred. Inside, she opened the heavy chest beside her bed. The tooled leather gun belt inside still bore the elaborate silver conchos that had caught the spotlight during countless performances. Beneath it lay the matched pair of Colt peacemakers, their pearl handles worn smooth by years of practice. Sarah closed the chest without touching the guns. She'd put that life behind her when she married Thomas, chosen peace over the roar of the crowd, the quiet satisfaction of honest work over the thrill of performing impossible shots. The woman known as the Angel of Death had died the day she said her wedding vows, but as she moved through her morning chores, Sarah found herself paying extra attention to the horizon, to the places where the broken country provided cover for men with bad intentions. The Carson gang might be professionals, but they were about to learn that in the Arizona territory, things weren't always what they seemed. A simple widow's ranch might just turn out to be the deadliest ground they'd ever tried to steal. The Winchester's report echoed off the canyon walls as Sarah put 3 rounds through a tin can at 200 yards. She hadn't planned to practice today, but Hank's warning had stirred something in her blood. The familiar weight of the rifle, the smell of gunpowder, the satisfaction of perfect shots, it all brought memories flooding back. "You're still the best I've ever seen," Thomas had told her the first time they met, after a show in St. Louis. He wasn't like the other men who came backstage all swagger and challenge. Thomas Hawkins had watched her performance with a craftsman's appreciation, understanding that her shooting wasn't just showmanship, it was art. Sarah chambered another round, sighting on a smaller target. The memories came with each shot, as precise as her aim. Buffalo Bill's voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Angel of Death." The roar of the crowd as she rode Thunder's predecessor, a white stallion named Ghost, at full gallop while shooting flames off candles at 50 paces. Crack, her father teaching her to shoot. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. His patience as she learned to control her breathing, to make the rifle an extension of her will. Crack, the night Thomas proposed, "I don't want the Angel of Death. I want Sarah, the woman behind the legend." His understanding that she was tired of being a spectacle, ready for a quieter life. Cracked 3 more cans down, each with a hole dead center. "Mrs. Hawkins," a young voice interrupted her reverie. Billy Jenkins, the general store owner's son, stood nervously at the edge of her practice range. At 16, he still had that gangly look of a colt growing into his legs. "Pa sent me to deliver your supplies, but you weren't at the house." "The shots drew you, did they?" Sarah smiled, breaking open the rifle to clean it. "Yes'm. Never seen anyone shoot like that. Is it true what they say about you being in Buffalo Bill's show?" Sarah studied the boy's earnest face. "That was a long time ago, Billy. But you were the Angel of Death, the one who could shoot a playing card in half. Lengthwise? The past has a way of following us," she said softly. "Sometimes it's best to let it rest." Billy helped her pack the supplies into her wagon, bursting with questions he was too polite to ask. As they worked, Deputy Marshal Frank Cooper rode up, his expression serious. "Sarah," he nodded. "Keeping in practice, I see." "Just making noise. To scare the coyotes, Frank." She'd known the deputy marshal since before Thomas's death. He was one of the few who'd never treated her like a curiosity. Might need more than noise soon. Carson gang hit another ranch last night, closer this time. Jensen's place just 15 miles north. Sarah secured the last crate. Hank mentioned they were moving into the territory. They're getting bolder. Shot up 2 of Jensen's hands when they tried to stop the theft. One might not make it. Frank's hand rested on his holstered revolver. "I know you can handle yourself, Sarah, but maybe it's time to consider moving Thunder into town for a spell." "This is my home, Frank. I'm not letting thieves change how I live." The deputy marshal studied her for a long moment. The Angel of Death wasn't just for show, was she? She was a performer, nothing more. Funny thing about reputations, Frank said carefully. Carson gang's got one for doing their homework. They know every ranch, every valuable horse in the territory. They'll have heard about Thunder. Then they'll come, Sarah said simply. Or they won't. Either way, I'll be here. After Frank and Billy left, Sarah stood on her porch watching the sun set. Thunder grazed peacefully in the corral, his black coat turned to liquid gold in the fading light. In the distance, dust rose. From cattle moving in the broken country, perfect cover for men with bad intentions. She thought of Thomas, of his gentle understanding when she'd wake in the night, practicing her draw in her sleep. He'd known what she was trying to leave behind and loved her enough to never ask if she missed it. The truth was, she didn't miss the show. But sometimes, in moments like this, she missed the clarity of who she'd been, the woman who could make impossible shots, who never hesitated, who knew exactly who and what she was. Sarah checked her rifle one last time before heading inside. The Carson gang might be professionals, but if they came, they'd learn what Thomas had understood. The angel of death hadn't been an act. She'd just been waiting in the wings, ready for one last performance. The bustling streets of Silver Creek rarely drew Sarah to town more than once a week, but the growing whispers of trouble demanded attention. She tied Thunder outside the general store, noting how conversations hushed as townspeople noticed her presence. News traveled fast in small towns, and everyone knew about the Carson gang's latest raid. Inside, Martha Jenkins looked up from her counter, relief crossing her face. Sarah, thank heavens, was hoping you'd come in today. The storekeeper's wife glanced around before lowering her voice. Riders came through last night, asking questions about local ranches. Sarah selected coffee and ammunition with deliberate casualness. What kind of questions? About valuable horses, mainly. Mentioned Thunder by name. Martha's hands twisted, her apron. Jim wanted to warn you, but he was afraid drawing attention might make things worse. Appreciate you telling me. Sarah added extra cartridges to her order. Any description of these riders? 4 men. Leader was tall, had a scar running down his left cheek, wore his gun cross-draw like some fancy pistolero. Martha shuddered. Something wrong about his eyes, Sarah, cold, like a rattler's. The description stirred something in Sarah's memory, a face from her show days, watching from the crowd with those same snake eyes. But before she could grasp it, the door swung open. Sheriff Tom Riley entered, looking older than his 50 years. Mrs. Hawkins, hoped I'd catch you in town. He nodded to Martha. Ma'am, mind giving us a moment? Once they were alone, Riley spoke quietly. Got a wire from the marshal's office in Yuma. Carson gang hit 2 more ranches yesterday. They're moving. This way, following the rail line. Patton suggests Silver Creek's next. Frank mentioned they're professionals. More than that, they're organized. Scout ahead, know exactly what they're after. Riley's weathered face showed genuine concern. Sarah, that horse of yours, word of his bloodline spread. Arabian stock crossed with quarter horse, trained by Thomas Hawkins himself. He'd fetch a fortune in Mexico. Thunder's not for sale. No, but he might be for stealing. Riley chose his next words carefully. Sarah, everyone respects your right to live as you choose, but times like these, a woman alone... I'm not alone. Sheriff, I have my rifle. Riley sighed. Was afraid you'd say that. Look, about your previous experience. Maybe it's time to let certain skills be known. Might make the gang think twice, or make them more determined. Sarah paid for her supplies. The angel of death was a performer, Sheriff. Nothing more. Both know that's not true. Saw you shoot. Once in Denver before you married Thomas. That wasn't just show business. That was a different life. Sarah headed for the door, then paused. Sheriff, the gang's leader. Scarred face, cross-draw rig. You know him? Maybe. Once. Long time ago. She left before he could press further. Outside, Sarah found young Billy Jenkins admiring Thunder. The boy's fascination with the horse matched his earlier curiosity about her shooting prowess. "He's something, isn't he?" Sarah smiled, loading. "Her supplies. Finest horse I've ever seen, Mrs. Hawkins." Billy stroked Thunder's neck. "Pa says he's got dessert blood. That true." His grandsire was a pure Arabian, brought over by Thomas's father, mixed with quarter-horse stock for stamina. Sarah checked Thunder's girth strap. "Billy, those riders who came through last night, they ask you anything?" The boy shifted uncomfortably. "One did, the scary one, with the scar. Asked if I knew. The widow Hawkins. If she was the same angel of death from the shows." He swallowed hard. "I didn't tell them nothing, Mrs. Hawkins, but they knew anyway." "It's all right, Billy. You did fine." Sarah mounted up, scanning the street with newfound wariness. That nagging memory was stronger now. A face in the crowd watching her shoot. A challenge issued and declined. A threat made in passing. As she rode home, Sarah noted signs she might have missed before. Fresh tracks crossing her boundary fence. A distant glint of sunlight on metal. In the hills. The Carson gang wasn't just coming. They were already here, watching, waiting. That night, Sarah cleaned her Winchester with extra care. The chest containing her showguns remained closed, but its presence felt heavier than usual. Outside, Thunder shifted restlessly in his corral, sensing the tension in the air. The Angel of Death might have been a performer, but the skills that had earned her that name were anything but an act. If the Carson gang wanted her horse, they'd learn the difference between showmanship and survival. Some talents, once learned, never truly fade. They just wait for the right moment to return. The sound that woke Sarah wasn't Thunder's distressed whinny. It was the silence that came before, a deep, unnatural quiet that every instinct recognized as wrong. Her hand found the Winchester before her feet hit the floor. Muscle memory from years of performance turned to deadly purpose. A moonbright night turned the bedroom window into a silver frame of her corral. Thunder stood unnaturally still, head high, nostrils flaring. 5 shadows moved with professional precision, their approach carefully planned to stay in the horse's blind spots. These weren't ordinary rustlers. Their movements showed military discipline. Sarah's first instinct was to shoot. At this range, even in moonlight, she could pick off 2 before they knew where the shots came from. But Thunder was too close to the intruders. One stray bullet, one panicked reaction. A voice drifted through her window, cold as a desert night. "Easy now, big fellow, nice and quiet." That voice. The memory snapped into focus. Jake Carson himself, the man who'd challenged her to a shooting contest in Denver 12 years ago, who'd sworn she'd regret humiliating him in front of a packed house. "Quite a prize you are," Carson continued, moving closer to Thunder. "Worth every bit of planning. Your mistress thinks her reputation protects you, but the Angel of Death is just a fading memory, an old woman playing at ranching." Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger, but experience held her back. They'd positioned themselves too carefully, used Thunder as a shield too deliberately. This wasn't just a theft, it was a trap. They wanted her to shoot, to give them excuse for bloodshed. Thunder's soft nicker of distress cut deeper than any bullet. The stallion knew these weren't friendly hands reaching for his halter, but years of gentle training had taught him to trust humans. Sarah watched, rage building in her chest as they slipped a hackamore over his head. "Mrs. Hawkins!" Carson's voice carried clearly now, meant to be heard. "I know you're watching. Could feel your eyes the moment we rode up, but we both know you won't risk your precious horse catching a stray bullet, the great Angel of Death reduced to hiding in the dark." Sarah's hands didn't shake as she laid the Winchester aside. They were right. At night, with Thunder in the line of fire, shooting wasn't an option. But they'd made one critical mistake. They assumed that because she'd left the show circuit, she'd gone soft, forgotten who she was. Through the window, she watched them lead Thunder away. Carson's men moved with the confidence of professionals who'd done this a dozen times before. Their horses waited in the shadows, chosen for silence and strength. Everything about the operation spoke of careful planning. "Leave the note," Carson ordered. "Make sure she understands the terms." Sarah waited until they were past the corner of the barn before moving. Her boots made no sound as she crossed to the heavy chest by her bed. The tooled leather gun belt felt like greeting an old friend. The matched Colts settled into their holsters with familiar weight. Dawn's first light found her standing in the empty corral. Thunder's tracks led north, toward the broken country where the Carson gang was known to hide. Deputy Marshal Cooper and Sheriff Riley arrived an hour later, drawn by reports of riders in the night. "4 men besides Carson," Sarah reported calmly, handing over the note they'd left. "Military trained, probably Confederate cavalry from their style. They're heading for the Diablo Mountains." Riley read the note, his face darkening. "They want you to come. This isn't just about the horse, it's a trap." "Of course it is." Sarah checked her rifle's action. The Winchester that had been a show prop for so many years now held the promise of retribution. "Carson's been planning this since Denver. Wanted to prove he could beat the Angel of Death at her own game." "Sarah," Cooper stepped forward, concern evident. "These men, they're killers. This is exactly what they want. To draw you out, make you come to them." "I know." She smiled, but there was nothing of humor in it. "That's their second mistake. Their first was taking my horse." "You can't go alone," Riley protested. "Give me time to organize a posse. The marshal's office in Yuma will send men." Sarah strapped on her gun belt, the pearl-handled Colts catching the morning sun. "A posse would just get in my way. Carson wants to see if the Angel of Death still exists. Fine. I'll show him she never really left." She mounted her second-best horse, a sturdy bay gelding. The Diablo Mountains loomed on the horizon, their red rocks already shimmering in the morning heat. Somewhere in that maze of canyons and caves, Carson waited with her horse and his challenge. At least wait for backup. Cooper made one last attempt. "Those mountains are perfect for ambush. That's why they chose them." Sarah checked her ammunition one final time, but they don't understand. Every show, every performance, every impossible shot. It was never about the spectacle. It was about being able to do what needed doing, when it needed doing. She turned her horse north. The woman who rode out was not the quiet widow they'd known. Her eyes held the cold certainty that had earned her that showbiz name so many years ago. The Angel of Death was returning to the stage, and this performance would be her deadliest yet. "Frank," she called back to the deputy marshal, "send a telegram to Buffalo Bill. Tell him I won't be accepting his offer to rejoin the show. Some skills don't belong in the spotlight anymore." As she rode toward the mountains, Sarah thought of Thunder, alone among hard men who saw him only as prophet. Carson had spent years plotting this revenge, thinking he was forcing her to become what she'd once been. He didn't understand. The Angel of Death hadn't been an act. She'd just been waiting for a reason to spread her wings again. The Diablo Mountains earned their name honestly. Red rocks twisted into devil's horns and jagged spires, creating a maze of shadows perfect for men with dark intentions. Sarah tracked the gang's trail with methodical precision, noting how they'd switch to shale and rock whenever possible to hide their tracks. Professional work, but they didn't know what they were dealing with. "They're good," she muttered to her bay gelding sergeant, "but 15 years of shooting coins out of the air teaches you to see what others miss." The signs were there for those who knew how to look. A fresh scratch on red stone where Thunder's unshod hoof had slipped, broken sagebrush showing which canyon they'd chosen, little markers that told a story of 5 men leading a stallion into devil's country. Around noon she found their first false trail. They'd split up, sending one rider east with Thunder's tracks clearly visible in sandy soil. Too clearly visible. Sarah studied the deception with professional appreciation. Most possessed would have followed the obvious trail, walking straight into an ambush. Instead, she guided Sargent toward the western canyon. "Carson's too smart for obvious. He'll keep Thunder close. His insurance that I'll come alone." A glint of metal caught her eye. Sarah reined in, studying the distant ridgeline through her rifle scope. A man lay prone among the rocks, watching the false trail through a brass spyglass. Another piece of the trap, a spotter to signal when their prey took the bait. Sarah made a mental note of his position, but didn't shoot. Let them think their plan was working. Let them believe she was still the performer they remembered, not the woman who'd spent 3 years watching Thomas track lost cattle through this same country. By late afternoon, she reached the old mining town of Devil's Rest. Not much left now, a few falling down buildings and a lot of bad memories. The perfect headquarters for men who didn't want to be found. Movement caught her eye. A local boy, Pablo, whose family ran goats in the mountains. He ducked behind a rock when he saw her, but Sarah had known his grandmother Maria for years. "It's okay, Pablo," she called softly in Spanish. "I'm looking for friends." The boy emerged cautiously. "Senora Hawkins, Abuela said you might come. She saw bad men with your black horse." "Can you take me to your grandmother?" Pablo led her to a hidden valley where Maria's goats grazed. The old woman sat in the shade of a mesquite tree, her dark eyes sharp as ever. "Angel of death," Maria greeted her in Spanish. "The spirits said you would return to these mountains." "The spirits say anything about 5 horse thieves?" Maria spat in the dust. "Carson and his devils. They camp in the old mine above Devil's Rest. 15 men total, not just the 5 you followed. They've been using the mine for months, planning something big." Sarah's jaw tightened. 15 men change things. They hurt anyone? Not yet, but they watch everything. Have men on all the high trails. Very professional, very careful. Maria studied her thoughtfully. "They say you're not the shooter you once were." Sarah drew her Colt in a blur of motion, firing in the same instant. 100 feet away, a nopal cactus fruit exploded. Before the echo faded, 5 more shots split 5 more fruits. The old woman nodded approvingly. "The angel of death never left," Sarah said quietly, reloading. "She just found other things to care about." "Carson watches the main trails," Maria offered. "But there are older paths. My people used them before the miners came. Pablo can show you." "Appreciate it, but I won't risk the boy." "Risk?" Maria laughed. "My grandson knows these mountains better than those white devils know their own mothers. He can show you ways they'll never see." Sarah considered her options. 15 men in defensive positions, probably with lookouts on every obvious approach. They'd expect her to come in shooting, the famous angel of death making her grand entrance. That's what the performer would have done. But Thomas had taught her something more valuable than showmanship. He'd taught her patience. "Pablo," she turned to the boy, "I need you to take a message to Deputy Marshal Cooper. Tell him I found the Carson gang's main camp. But tell him to wait. Give me 2 days before he brings his men." "You're still going?" "In alone?" Maria asked. Sarah checked her rifles again, the Winchester she'd used for show, and Thomas's old Sharps buffalo gun with its heavy octagonal barrel. "They want the angel of death? I'll give them a performance they'll never forget." She spent the rest of the day studying the mine through her rifle scope, watching patrol patterns and guard changes. Carson ran a tight operation. Armed men walked. Regular routes, checking sightlines and approaches. They'd chosen their fortress well. But they had 2 weaknesses. First, they were watching for a frontal assault, a dramatic entrance worthy of Buffalo Bill's show. Second, they didn't know these mountains like Pablo did, or like Thomas had. As sunset painted the red rocks purple, Sarah laid out her weapons for a final check. The matched Colts, their pearl handles worn smooth by years of practice. The Winchester, which had split playing cards and shot flames off candles. The heavy Sharps, which could reach out past 800 yards when needed. "Your husband was a good man," Maria said softly. "He understood what you were, respected your gift. Thomas taught me there are more important things than being the fastest or the most famous." And now Sarah's eyes were cold as she watched Carson's men light their evening fires. Now I'm going to teach them the difference between a performer and a shooter. I just need one thing from Pablo first. What's that? Show me the old paths that lead above the mine. Tomorrow, the angel of death is going to remind them why you don't steal a widow's horse. Before dawn, Sarah set up her practice targets in a hidden valley Pablo had shown her. 6 bottles at staggered distances from 50 to 400 yards. The sun wasn't up yet, but she couldn't wait. Some skills needed to be perfect. The Winchester came up smooth as silk. 6 shots, 6 bottles shattered in rapid succession. Fast work, but not fast enough. She reloaded, trying to ignore how her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from anticipation. Show shooting won't help you against... "Carson!" a familiar voice called. Sarah spun to find Frank Cooper leading his horse into the valley. "He's expecting theatrical tricks." "Didn't ask for company, Frank." "No, but you're getting it anyway." The deputy marshal drew his own rifle. "Show me what you're practicing." Sarah hesitated, then set up more bottles. This time she drew and fired from the hip, the way she had thousands of times in the show. 6 more bottles exploded into glass rain. "Impressive," Frank nodded, "but Carson's men won't stand still like bottles." "That wasn't practice," Sarah said quietly. "That was warming up." She pulled a handful of coins from her pocket. "Toss them, high as you can, one at a time." Frank's eyes widened as he understood, but he complied. The first silver dollar caught the dawn light as it peaked. Sarah's colt barked once. The coins spun violently off course, a hole drilled dead center. Again, 5 more coins, 5 more shots. Each one struck precisely, the bullets passing clean through dead center. Frank collected the coins, studying the perfect holes with disbelief. "God's truth," he whispered. "The stories about you. They weren't exaggerated. They weren't stories." Sarah reloaded mechanically. Every shot was real. Every trick was actual skill. Buffalo Bill didn't hire frauds. "Why'd you quit?" "Really?" Sarah's hand stilled on her gun belt. "Thomas saw past the angel of death. Saw me. Offered me a life where I didn't have to prove myself every day." She smiled sadly. 15 years of shooting coins out of the air, cards off posts, flames off candles. It was enough. Until now. Until they took my horse. She drew and fired. In a single motion, taking the head off a sage hen at 30 yards. Carson thinks he's facing a performer, someone who needed an audience. He doesn't understand. Frank watched her reload again. Understand what? All those shows, all those tricks, they weren't the real skill. The real skill was being able to make those shots every time, under any conditions, no matter what. She pointed to the cliff above them. "See that rock formation? Looks like a church spire?" Frank nodded. 850 yards. Maximum range for the sharps with this. "Wind!" She lifted Thomas's heavy rifle. "Watch!" The shot echoed off the canyon walls. Through his field glasses, Frank saw chips fly from the exact point she'd indicated. "Jesus," he breathed. "At that distance doesn't matter. Wind doesn't matter. Nothing matters except the shot." Sarah's voice was distant, remembering. That's what Thomas understood. What Carson never did. The tricks weren't tricks. They were proof that I could do what needed doing, when it needed doing. She turned to face him fully. "Frank, I need a promise from you. Name it. When you bring your men in 2 days, don't interfere unless I signal, no matter what you see or hear. Carson needs to learn a lesson, and it needs to be personal." Frank studied her for a long moment. The woman before him wasn't the quiet widow he'd known. This was someone else, someone who'd kept her deadly skills sharp, even while pretending to let them rust. "They've got 15 men up there," he warned. "All armed, all killers. Numbers don't matter." Sarah's smile was cold as she began breaking down her rifles for cleaning. Carson wanted the angel of death. He's about to learn why that name wasn't just for show. They spent the rest of the morning practicing. Not tricks now, but practical. Shooting, moving targets, multiple targets, quick reloads, each motion smooth as flowing water, each shot perfect. Frank watched in growing amazement as Sarah demonstrated skill beyond anything he'd imagined. "Tonight," she said finally, "I start teaching them fear. Pablo showed me paths they don't know about, high routes that let me shoot down into there. "Il camp." She checked her ammunition one final time. "By this time tomorrow, Carson's men will be jumping at shadows." "And Thunder?" "They've got him in the old ore processing shed. Good cover, clear fields of fire. They're using him as bait, waiting for me to try a rescue." She smiled grimly. "Let them wait. First, I'm going to remind them what it means to face someone who can put a bullet through a playing card edgewise at 100 yards. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah packed her guns with practiced efficiency. Each weapon had its purpose, each bullet a job to do. Carson had spent years planning his revenge, thinking he was forcing her to become what she'd once been. "Time to go to work," she told Frank. "Remember your promise. 2 days, no matter what you hear." The deputy marshal watched her disappear into the rocks, moving like a ghost in the morning shadows. He almost pitied Carson's men. They thought they were dealing with a legend, a performer past her prime. Instead, they were about to face the real angel of death. And this time, she wasn't performing for applause. Night fell over Devil's Rest like a velvet curtain, bringing with it a silence that made Carson's men nervous. They'd expected the angel of death to come charging in at dawn, all flash and fury like her old show days. Instead, they'd spent a day watching empty trails, jumping at shadows. Sarah observed their camp from high above, where Pablo's hidden path gave her a perfect view. Through her rifle scope, she counted heads and noted positions. Carson ran a tight operation. Men posted. In pairs, regular patrols, clear fields of fire. In the old ore processing shed, Thunder's black coat gleamed under lamplight. "Getting soft, boys," she whispered, noting how the guards had bunched up near the fires. Night in the desert was cold, but letting your eyes adjust to firelight was a rookie mistake. One she intended to exploit. The first shot came without warning. A coffee pot exploded on the fire, spraying 3 men with scalding liquid and grounds. Before they could react, another shot split a support rope, dropping a canvas shelter onto 2 more guards. Chaos erupted in the camp. Men dove for cover, shooting blindly at the darkness. Sarah smiled grimly as she worked the Winchester's lever. They were looking in the wrong direction, expecting her to attack from the obvious approaches below. "That's the angel of death," someone shouted. "She's out there. Shut up and find her." Carson's voice cut through the panic. "She's one woman, with the rifle. Spread out and—" His words ended in a curse as a shot took his hat clean off his head. Sarah worked the lever again, and his gun belt went flying, the bullet striking the buckle with surgical precision. "One woman with a rifle," Sarah called, her voice echoing off the canyon walls. "But you knew what that meant in Denver, didn't you, Jake? Before you ran away." More blind shooting answered her. Sarah changed positions smoothly, using the paths Pablo had shown her. The boy knew these mountains like she knew her rifles. Every shadow, every hidden route. 12 years to plan this, she continued, her voice seemingly coming from everywhere. 12 years to set your trap. But you forgot something important. A lamp shattered, plunging half the camp into darkness. 2 more shots, and the remaining lamps followed. Now the fires worked against them, ruining their night vision while she operated in complete darkness. "What's that?" Carson's voice held forced bravado. "What did I forget? That the tricks were never tricks." Sarah's Sharp's rifle boomed, the heavy bullet destroying a stack of ammunition boxes. Every impossible shot was real. Every performance was proof. She gave them a minute to think about that. In the camp below, Carson's men had pressed themselves against rocks and walls, trying to present smaller targets. They'd come expecting to face an aging performer. Instead, they were being systematically picked apart by an invisible force. "Listen, up," Sarah pitched her voice to Carrie. "I'm taking my horse back. Question is, how many of you want to die trying to stop me?" "You can't hit what you can't see," one of Carson's men shouted. Sarah's response was 5 rapid shots. 5 hats went flying off 5 heads, each with a neat hole drilled through the crown. Want to bet your life on that? The camp fell silent, except for the crackle of fires and the distant cry of a hunting owl. Sarah used the quiet to move again, circling to another of Pablo's hidden perches. "I'm giving you one chance," she announced. "Anyone who wants to leave, drop your guns and walk out now. Do it in the next 5 minutes, and you live. Stay, and you learn why they really called me the Angel of Death." Movement in the camp. 2 men stood slowly, then 3 more. Gunbelts hit the dirt with dull thuds. "Don't you dare," Carson roared. "She's bluffing, she can't." The words died as a bullet kicked dirt between his feet. Another shot knocked the cigar from his mouth before he could blink. "Still think I'm bluffing, Jake?" 5 men took their chance, hurrying out of camp with their hands raised. Sarah let them go. They weren't the ones she wanted. Through her scope, she watched Carson's face contort with rage. "You're still the same show-off," he shouted. "All flash, no killer instinct. That's why you couldn't take that shot in Denver." "Wrong. Again." Sarah worked the lever, chambering another round. "I didn't take that shot because there were innocent people behind you. Out here, it's just us." To prove her point, she put a bullet through a playing card someone had left on a crate. Even at this distance, even in firelight, the hole was dead center. "Remember what you said that day?" she continued, "that I was just a circus act, that real shooting wasn't about tricks?" More men were wavering now, looking to their weapons and the darkness beyond camp. They'd come to steal horses, not face a legend who could shoot the spots off cards at night. "Last chance," Sarah called. "Next man who moves gets to find out if he's faster than a bullet." Carson grabbed the nearest man. "Anyone who runs dies. She's one woman. One. One woman who just shot 5 hats off 5 heads without killing anyone," someone muttered. "I didn't sign up for this, Jake." Sarah smiled in the darkness. Fear was spreading through the camp like poison. By dawn, Carson's carefully built operation would be coming apart at the seams. "Think about it, boys," she called softly. "I could have killed any of you tonight. Instead, I gave you a warning. Tomorrow night won't be so gentle." With that, she melted away into the darkness, leaving them to watch the shadows and think about what she'd said. As she made her way back to her hidden camp, Sarah heard Thunder's distant whinny. "Soon, boy," she promised silently. "But first, these." Men needed to learn why you never steal from someone who can split a playing card at 100 yards, because the next card she split would be Carson's, and she wouldn't be using a rifle to do it. Dawn revealed the impact of Sarah's night work. 5 men gone, leaving their guns behind. The remaining gang members moved with nervous energy, flinching at every shadow. Carson himself paced like a caged mountain lion, barking orders that grew. Increasingly desperate. "Double the guards. Check every ridge. She's just one woman. Find her." Sarah watched through her scope from yet another of Pablo's hidden positions. The boy had shown her a dozen such spots, each offering perfect lines of sight into the camp. More importantly, each connected to the others through hidden paths even Carson's best trackers couldn't follow. Through the magnified view, she studied Thunder in his makeshift corral. The stallion looked unharmed but agitated, picking up on the men's nervous energy. One guard made the mistake of getting too close with a whip. The shot kicked dust at his feet, freezing him mid-step. "That's your last warning about my horse." Sarah's voice echoed off the canyon walls. The guard dropped the whip and scrambled away. "Come down and face me," Carson shouted at the rocks. "Or are you still just a carnival act hiding in the shadows?" Sarah's response was surgical. 3 shots in rapid succession. One knocked the coffee cup from Carson's hand, one split his gun belt clean off, and one put a neat hole through his sleeve without breaking skin. "That carnival act just disarmed you from 600 yards, she called. "Want to see what I can do at dueling distance?" More men exchanged worried looks. They'd lost another 2 in the night, sneaking away rather than face what they couldn't. Fight! 8 remained, counting Carson. She's playing with us, one muttered. Like a cat with mice. Shut up! Carson grabbed a fresh gun belt. She's trying to spook us. That's all her famous act ever was. Tricks and psychology. Psychology? Sarah's laugh echoed through the canyons. All right, Jake. Let's talk psychology. Tell your men about Denver. Tell them why you really hate me. Don't listen to her. Tell them how you called me out, how you wagered $5,000 you could outshoot the Angel of Death. Tell them how you lost. Movement caught her eye. 2 men trying to slip around behind where they thought her voice was coming from. Sarah put bullets in the dirt at their feet, herding them back to camp. But that's not why you hate me, is it, Jake? It's what happened after. Tell them. Tell them how you tried to force the shot by putting a child behind you. Mutterings spread through the remaining men. Even hardened outlaws had lines they wouldn't cross. That's a lie. Carson's face had gone red. She's trying to turn you against me, am I? Ask him why I wouldn't take the shot. Ask him what kind of man uses a child as a shield, then spends 12 years plotting revenge because a woman made him look weak. The revelation hit like dynamite in a mineshaft. 2 more men backed, away from Carson, their expressions showing fresh uncertainty. Boss? One called. That true about the kid? Carson's response was to draw and fire at the nearest ridge. Find her! $1,000 to the man who brings me her head. Sarah waited until the echoes died. That's right, boys. Your boss couldn't beat me fair, so he tried to force me to back down by putting an innocent behind him. When that failed, he ran. Been running ever since, hiding behind other men's guns. Through her scope, she watched the remaining gang members process this. Hard men, killers most of them, but even they had codes. Using children crossed lines most wouldn't stomach. You want psychology, Jake? Here's some. By sunset, you'll have 3 men left. By midnight, you'll be alone, because they're starting to understand what you never did. The Angel of Death wasn't an act. She was a promise. To emphasize her point, she put a bullet through the playing card one man had just drawn from his pocket. The ace of spades split perfectly down the middle, both halves fluttering to the dirt. That was from behind you, she called. I can hit you from any direction at any time. The only reason you're still breathing is I want you to suffer first. Want you to watch your whole operation fall apart. Silence fell over the camp. Men looked at their boss with new eyes, seeing not a fearsome leader, but a coward who'd spent 12 years plotting revenge for wounded pride. One more thing, Sarah's voice carried clearly. Check your ammunition boxes, count your bullets. You might find a few surprises. Carson rushed to the nearest crate, throwing it open. His curse echoed off the canyon walls. During the night, Sarah had put a bullet through half their ammunition, rendering it useless. See, Jake, while you were jumping at shadows, I was doing real work. Just like Denver, you're so busy with the show you miss what's really happening. She left them with that thought, moving silently through Pablo's paths to her next position. By noon, at least 2 more would run. By sunset, as she'd promised, Carson would be down to his most hardcore followers. Then the real performance would begin. Thunder's angry whinny carried through the canyons. Soon, boy, Sarah promised silently. But first, these men needed to understand the difference between legend and reality. The Angel of Death hadn't been just a stage name. It had been a warning, one Carson was about to understand far too late. Midday heat shimmered off the rocks as Sarah made her way back to Maria's camp. She needed rest before tonight's performance, but her mind wouldn't quiet. Something about Carson's rage felt deeper than wounded pride. 12 years was a long time. To nurse a grudge over a shooting contest. You have a visitor, Maria announced as Sarah approached. One you need to hear. A man rose from the shadows of Maria's shelter. Sarah recognized him instantly. Peter Collins, Carson's former second-in-command, who'd slipped away in the night. Her rifle came up smooth as breathing. Wait, Collins held up empty hands. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to tell you the truth. About Carson, about your husband. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. Thomas died of fever. Is that what the doctor told you? Colin's eyes held genuine regret. The Dr. Carson paid off? The world tilted sideways. Sarah's voice came from far away. Explain. Carson's revenge didn't start with stealing your horse. It started 3 years ago with a bottle of poisoned whiskey delivered to your husband's sickbed. The rifle barrel didn't waver, but Sarah's heart turned to ice. You're lying. Carson spent 9 years trying to find a way to hurt you. The shooting contest was just the start. He became obsessed, followed your career, your marriage, your retirement. Then he realized the way to break the angel of death wasn't to outshoot her. It was to take everything she loved. Memory crashed through Sarah's defenses. Thomas's sudden illness, the doctor's strange insistence on specific medicines, the way the fever had resisted every treatment. The doctor's name was Mitchell, Collins continued. Carson paid him $5,000, the same amount he lost in Denver. Poetic justice, he called it. Why tell me this? Because I was there, helped plan it, didn't know about the poison until after. But I kept quiet. Been carrying that guilt ever since. Collins met her gaze steadily. Last night, watching you work, reminded me there's still lines some men won't cross. Carson's crossed them all. Sarah's mind raced through implications. The horse theft, this whole setup, it wasn't about the Denver contest at all. No, he wanted to draw you out, make you come after him. His final revenge, breaking the legend of the angel of death. Collins spat in the dust, but he didn't count on one thing. What's that? You're better than you ever were in the shows. More dangerous, because now you're not performing. Now you're hunting. Sarah finally lowered the rifle. How many men does he have left? 5, counting him. His most loyal, or most scared. Collins pulled a folded paper from his shirt. Here's what you really need to know. The mine isn't just a hideout. Carson's been planning something bigger, something that'll get a lot of innocent people killed. The paper contained a detailed map, marked routes, schedules. Sarah's blood ran colder with each detail. He's going to hit the Silver Creek Bank, Collins explained, during the town's Founders' Day celebration, using your horse theft as cover while his main force strikes. Hundreds of people in the streets, maximum chaos, maximum casualties. When? 2 days. That's why he's so desperate to keep you up here. The gang's already moving into position in Silver Creek. Sarah studied the map. Pieces falling into place. Carson hadn't just killed her husband and stolen her horse. He'd used her reputation, her predictable response, as cover for an even greater evil. One more thing, Collins added, quietly. Carson didn't work alone 3 years ago. Someone in Silver Creek helped him, someone who wanted your ranch. Someone who knew Thomas's habits. The final piece clicked. Sarah's voice was deadly calm. Who? Sheriff Riley. He's been Carson's partner from the start. Fed him information about you, about the town's defenses. Even suggested using the Founders' Day celebration as cover. The betrayal cut deep. Riley had been at Thomas's funeral, had helped her manage the ranch in those first hard months. All while knowing, why are you telling me this? Because Carson needs to be stopped. But if you go after him, guns blazing like he expects, Riley's men will massacre half the town. Collins stood slowly. You're not just facing a gang leader anymore. You're facing corruption that goes deeper than anyone knows. Sarah folded the map carefully, her mind already shifting plans. She wasn't dealing with a simple horse thief nursing an old grudge. This was something far darker. What will you do? Maria asked softly. Sarah checked her weapons with mechanical precision. Her voice, when it came, carried the cold certainty of a contract signed in blood. First, I'm going to get my horse back. Then I'm going to find every man who had a hand in Thomas's death. Then I'm going to show them why the Angel of Death wasn't just a stage name. She turned to Collins. "Get word to Deputy Marshal Cooper. Tell him everything, but tell him to wait for my signal. Carson thinks he's written the final act of this show. Time to remind him who the real performer is." As Collins rode for Silver Creek, Sarah began cleaning her rifles. Each motion was practiced, perfect, but her hands shook with cold rage. Carson had killed her husband. Riley had betrayed her trust. They'd spent 3 years watching her grieve, planning an even greater evil. Now they would learn what happened. When you pushed a legend too far, the Angel of Death was about to give her final performance, and the ticket would be paid in blood. Dusk gathered like a bruise over Devil's Rest as Sarah laid out her weapons with ritualistic precision. Each gun represented a different part of her past. The show guns with their pearl handles, Thomas's heavy sharps rifle, her father's Winchester. Tonight, they'd serve a new purpose. "You're sure about the other men?" she asked Maria, who was brewing coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. 3 more left in the night. Carson rages, but he cannot stop them. Now he has only 4 who stay. The ones with blood on their hands, perfect, the guilty ones, the ones who'd helped murder Thomas, were all that remained. Sarah checked her ammunition, each motion precise despite the cold fury in her heart. "Pablo," she called softly. The boy appeared like a shadow. "I need you to take a message to Frank Cooper. Tell him about Riley, about the bank job planned for Founders Day, but tell him to keep it quiet. We don't know who else in town might be working." "With Carson?" "Si, senora." Pablo hesitated. "The men in camp, they speak of you like a ghost. Like La Llorona, the weeping woman who brings death." "Good. Fear makes men stupid, makes them forget to watch the obvious while jumping at shadows." Through her rifle scope, Sarah studied Carson's remaining men. They'd pulled back to defensive. Positions around the ore shed where Thunder was kept. No more patrols, no more bravado. Now they were just waiting, knowing what was coming but unable to stop it. "Carson thinks he's clever," she told Maria, "using my reputation, my predictable response to the horse theft, as cover for his bank robbery. He forgot something important." "What's that?" "In the show, every trick shot was planned, practiced, perfect, but the real skill wasn't hitting the target." Sarah's smile was cold as desert frost. It was making the audience watch the wrong hand. Movement in the camp caught her attention. Carson was arguing with one of his remaining men, gesturing angrily toward the surrounding cliffs. Even from this distance, his frustration was evident. His perfect plan was unraveling, and he couldn't stop it. "They expect you to attack tonight," Maria observed, "to come for your horse in darkness. They expect the Angel of Death to make a grand entrance, one last performance." Sarah chambered around in the Winchester. "Instead, I'm going to teach them the difference between a show and a reckoning." Her first shot split the coffee pot by Carson's fire. Her second took the hat off his head. Not killing shots, not yet. These were messages, reminders that she could end them any time she chose. "You can't hide up there forever," Carson shouted at the cliffs. "Sooner or later you'll have to come down." Sarah's response was another shot that kicked dust between his feet. Let him think she was still playing games. Let him believe this was still about Thunder, about revenge for the horse theft. The real performance was yet to come. "Maria," she said quietly, "I need one more favor. When Frank Cooper arrives, tell him to get word to Bill Jenkins at the Silver Creek Telegraph office. Tell him to send messages to every marshal's office within 100 miles. Carson's men aren't just planning a robbery, they're planning a massacre. We'll need help to protect the town." The old woman nodded, understanding. "And Sheriff Riley?" "Leave Riley to me." Sarah's voice could have frozen hell itself. "He was at Thomas's funeral, helped me through those first months of grieving, all while knowing he'd helped murder my husband." She raised the Winchester again, but this time she didn't shoot. Through the scope, she watched Carson posting guards, preparing for what he thought would be her final attack. He still didn't understand. This wasn't going to be a shooting gallery performance with fancy tricks and theatrical flair. This was going to be a lesson in what happened when you pushed a legend too far, when you mistook mercy for weakness, patience for fear. The angel of death was about to give her final performance, and the price of admission would be paid in blood. Night settled over the mountains like a funeral shroud. In Carson's camp, his 4 remaining men huddled near their fires, weapons ready, jumping at every shadow. Above them, Sarah made her final preparations with the same meticulous care she'd once given her show routine. "Deputy Marshal Cooper has arrived," Pablo whispered, materializing from the darkness. "He brings news. Sheriff Riley is gathering men, claiming they're for protection during Founders' Day." "How many?" 20 riders. "Rough men, not from town." Sarah nodded grimly. "More of Carson's gang, positioning themselves for the bank robbery." Riley was using his badge to make it all look legitimate. "Any word from the telegraph office?" "See, marshals are coming from 3 territories, but they cannot arrive before Founders' Day," which was exactly what Carson and Riley were counting on. They'd planned everything perfectly, or so they thought. Sarah checked her ammunition one final time, each bullet a promise waiting to be kept. Thunder's worried whinny drifted up from the camp. The stallion could sense the coming violence, just as he'd always known when it was time for her performance in the show. But this wouldn't be like those choreographed exhibitions. This would be something else entirely. "You're sure about the back way into town?" she asked Pablo. "See. Old mining tracks from before the railroad. Carson's men don't know them." The boy's eyes were serious in the starlight. "You can move your horse through while they think you're still here." Perfect. Sarah had spent the day cataloguing every piece of Carson's plan, finding its weaknesses. He expected her to make a dramatic rescue attempt tonight, to try saving Thunder, in some grand gesture worthy of Buffalo Bill's show. Instead, a shot rang out from the camp below. One of Carson's men, firing at shadows. "Getting jumpy down there, boys?" she called, her voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Wondering when the angel of death will swoop in?" "Come and try it," Carson shouted back, but his voice held an edge of desperation. "You can't pick us off one by one forever." Sarah's response was a shot that split his coffee cup in half. "Actually, I can, but that wouldn't be very sporting, would it? Tell you what, Jake. Let's make a deal." "What kind of deal?" Suspicion dripped from his words. "You and me. Sunrise. A proper shooting contest, just like Denver. Winner takes all." Silence from the camp. Sarah could almost see Carson's mind working, trying to figure her angle. He still thought this was about pride, about proving who was the better shot. "And if I refuse?" Sarah's rifle barked 3 times. 3 hats went flying off 3 heads, each with a perfect hole through the crown. "Then I start aiming lower." More. Silence. Then Carson's laugh, forced and hollow. "Sunrise it is. One last performance from the angel of death." "One last performance," Sarah agreed softly, but she was already moving through Pablo's hidden paths, setting her real plan in motion. Let Carson spend the night preparing for a shooting contest. By the time he realized what was really happening, it would be far too late. "Maria," she whispered when she reached the old woman's camp, "it's time. Tell Frank Cooper to start moving his men into position, but quietly. No one in town can know what's coming." "You're really going through with this?" Frank himself stepped from the shadows, taking on Carson's whole operation, and the sheriff too. "They killed my husband, Frank, used poison like cowards, then watched me grieve for 3 years while they planned something even worse." Sarah checked her guns one final time. The Angel of Death was never just a stage name. Tonight they learn. Why? She mounted up, ready to begin the long ride around the mountains to the old mining tracks. Behind her, Pablo and Maria's people were already moving, spreading word to Cooper's deputies. By sunrise, everything would be in place. "Remember," she told Frank, "wait for my signal. Carson and Riley think they know what's coming. Time to remind them that the best performances are the ones the audience never sees coming. The night wind carried thunder's distant whinny, a sound of challenge and recognition. "Soon, boy," Sarah promised silently. But first, she had a show to put on, and this performance would be her deadliest yet, because Carson had forgotten the most important lesson from their last encounter. The angel of death had never been an act. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to prove it. Dawn painted the mountains blood red as Carson and his men gathered in the clearing before the mine. They'd arranged boxes and barrels as shooting targets, creating an elaborate course worthy of Buffalo Bill's show. Carson himself stood center, stage, guns polished, practicing his quick draw, but Sarah wasn't there. "Where is she?" Carson paced, checking the sun. "She made the challenge." His remaining men scanned the ridgelines, fingers tight on triggers. The angel of death had haunted them for days. Surely she wouldn't miss her own performance. The first sign something was wrong came from town, a rider pushing his horse hard up the trail. "Boss!" one of Riley's deputies, face pale with panic. "She hit the bank. The angel of death. She's in Silver Creek." Carson's face went from confusion to rage as understanding dawned. While he'd spent the night preparing for a shooting contest, Sarah had slipped away through Pablo's secret paths. She wasn't coming to him. She was taking the fight to Riley. "Mount up!" he roared. "Everyone to town, now!" But as they ran for their horses, shots rang out from 3 directions. Deputy Marshal Cooper's men hidden in the rocks, picking off. Bounce with careful aim. Not killing shots, just enough to lame the horses, strand the outlaws. It's a trap. Carson's last loyal gun hand fell with a bullet in his shoulder. "She played us!" In Silver Creek, Sarah walked calmly down the main street, pearl-handled Colts hanging loose in their holsters. Thunder, rescued in the night through old mining tracks, matched her stride for stride. "Riley!" Her voice carried the same projection. She'd used in shows, reaching every corner of town. "Time to talk about Thomas." The sheriff burst from his office, guns drawn. Behind him, his 20 deputies, Carson's advance force, spread out along the street. "Should have stayed in the mountains," Riley called. "Playing your games with Carson." Sarah's smile was cold as mountain ice. "Those weren't games, Tom. Those were rehearsals, testing my aim, my speed, making sure 3 years of playing widow hadn't dulled my edge." She stopped in the center of the street. Around her, townspeople were backing away, sensing what was coming. Windows slammed shut. "Doors locked." See, Carson thought he was so clever, using my reputation, my predictable response to the horse theft, as cover for his bank robbery. Sarah's hands hung easy, close to her guns. But he forgot something important. "So did you." "Yeah?" Riley's voice wavered slightly. "What's that?" "In the show, every trick shot was planned, practiced, perfect. But the real skill," her eyes were deadly cold, "the real skill was making the audience watch the wrong hand." That's when Riley heard it. Horses thundering from all directions. Frank Cooper's deputies emerging from every side street. Behind them, honest townspeople with rifles and shotguns, led by old Maria and her people. The trap wasn't in the mountains. It was here, in the very town Riley had thought he controlled. Now then, Sarah's voice carried the same performance tone she'd once used to introduce her deadliest tricks. "Let's talk about how you helped poison my husband." The street exploded into chaos. Riley's fake deputies dove for cover as Cooper's men opened fire from the side streets. Sarah didn't move, standing calm as morning, while lead filled the air around her. "Last chance, Tom," she called over the gunfire. "Surrender clean, tell the truth about Thomas. Maybe you live through this." Riley's answer was a shot that would have taken her head off if she hadn't moved like lightning, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. His gun went spinning, a perfect shot through the cylinder that left his hand intact. That was a trick. "Shot," Sarah's voice carried clearly. "Want to see what happens when I'm actually trying to kill someone?" The thunder of hooves announced Carson's arrival. He'd managed to salvage one horse, riding it half to death getting to town. He reined in hard at the edge of the battlefield, taking in the scene with fury and disbelief. "You think you've won?" he roared. "I've still got men throughout the territory. This isn't over!" Sarah's laugh was cold and carried perfectly, all those years of projection in noisy circus tents paying off. "Look again, Jake. Look harder." That's when Carson saw it. Among Cooper's deputies were faces he recognized, his own men, the ones who'd run away from the mountain camp. They hadn't fled in fear. They'd switched sides, drawn by a combination of Sarah's deadly skill and their own guilty consciences. Impossible! Carson drew both guns. The angel of death was just a show, a performance. Partially true. Sarah turned to face him, and everyone in the street felt the temperature drop. The angel of death was a performance. This is personal. Carson fired, fast and accurate. Sarah moved like smoke, her return shot taking his left gun with surgical precision. His right gun barked again and met the same fate. "That was for the horse theft," she announced. Then her voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "This is for Thomas." Her draw was invisible. The shot seemed to materialize out of thin air, striking Carson's gun belt buckle with such force it spun him around. He stumbled, trying to keep his feet. "Remember Denver," Sarah advanced slowly. "How you put that child behind you, tried to force me to back down. You thought that was weakness, didn't you? My refusal to take the shot. Should have killed you then," Carson spat. "No, Jake, that's what you never understood." She stopped 10 paces away. "I didn't spare you out of weakness. I spared you because killing you in front of a crowd wouldn't have meant anything. But this is justice." Riley chose that moment to make his move, pulling a hidden derringer. Sarah's shot took it from his hand before he could level it, her second shot knocking him flat with a bullet through his shoulder. "That was your last mistake, Tom." She kept both guns trained on the fallen men. "Now about my husband's murder. I think it's time the whole town heard the truth." The town gathered as Sarah held Carson and Riley at gunpoint. Thunder stood beside her, a living symbol of everything they'd tried to steal. The morning sun cast long shadows down Main Street as justice prepared to meet vengeance. "Tell them," Sarah commanded. "Tell them how you poisoned a good man's whiskey, how you watched me grieve for 3 years while plotting worse crimes." Riley's face twisted with hate. "You want the truth? Fine. Thomas Hawkins was going to sell that water rights claim to the mining company. Would have made the whole gang's operation impossible." "So you killed him." Sarah's voice could have frozen fire. "Then helped plan a bank robbery that would have gotten half the town killed. The angel of death," Carson laughed bitterly. "So high and mighty. But you're just like us, a killer putting on a show." Sarah's shot took his hat off with surgical precision. "The difference, Jake, is I never pretended to be anything else. The show was just practice. Every trick shot, every performance. It was all building to this moment." "You can't prove any of it," Riley ground out. "Actually, she can." Frank Cooper stepped forward, holding papers. "Found these in your office, Tom. Detailed plans for the bank job. Lists of Carson's men positioned as deputies. And this," he held up a small notebook, "your personal ledger, including the $5,000 you paid Dr. Mitchell to falsify. Thomas Hawkins' cause of death." The crowd's murmur turned ugly. Sarah kept her guns trained steady, but her voice carried to every ear. 3 years I played the grieving widow. Let you think I'd gone soft, all while you planned to rob our town blind and kill anyone who got in your way. Her smile was colder than mountain frost. "But you forgot the most important lesson from Denver." "Yeah?" Carson spat. "What's that?" "The audience only sees what the performer wants them to see." In one fluid motion, she holstered her right gun and drew a derringer from her sleeve, the exact same model Riley had tried to use. Both men's eyes widened in recognition. "That's right." Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. "I knew about the backup. A gun because I knew about everything, every plan, every piece of evidence. The horse theft wasn't your idea at all, was it, Jake?" Riley suggested it, knowing exactly how I'd react. The perfect distraction, Riley admitted, his laugh turning into a pained cough. Keep the legendary Angel of Death busy in the mountains while we set up the real job. Except I was never in those mountains, not after the first night. Just my voice, my shots, and a lot of willing helpers who knew these hills better than you ever could. The truth dawned in Carson's eyes. The spotters we never could find, Maria's people, the vanishing tracks, Pablo's hidden paths, and now Sarah's guns didn't waver. Now justice gets its due. Do it then, Carson snarled. Prove you're the killer we always said you were. Sarah's smile was almost gentle. Oh, Jake, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to do something much worse. She turned to Frank Cooper. Deputy Marshal, I believe you have some arrests to make, and some very interested territorial judges waiting to hear this whole story. The last thing Carson and Riley saw before the handcuffs closed was the Angel of Death, holstering her guns with the same fluid grace that had made her famous. She hadn't just beaten them, she'd outperformed them. The setting sun painted Silver Creek in shades of gold, as Deputy Marshal Cooper's men led Carson and Riley away in chains. Their captured gang members filled 3 wagons bound for the territorial prison, each man carrying the weight of their crimes and the memory of how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. Sarah stood on the boardwalk, Thunder's reins loose in her hand, watching justice finally claim its due. Frank Cooper approached, holding Thomas's journal they'd found in Riley's office. Thought you might want this back, he said softly. He wrote about you, you know, right up until the end. Sarah took the leather-bound book with steady hands. He knew, didn't he, about the poison? Last entry suggests he did, was trying to protect you, gather evidence. Riley found out, had Carson speed up their timeline. She nodded, one hand stroking Thunder's neck. The stallion's presence was solid, real, a reminder that some things could be recovered. Some wrongs could be righted. The Angel of Death, Frank mused. All this time we thought it was just a stage name. It was, Sarah replied quietly. But sometimes the best performances are the ones that tell the truth. A month after Carson and Riley's arrest, Silver Creek had changed. The town's people walked taller, knowing how they'd come together to protect their own. Maria's people moved freely in the streets, no longer shadows on the edges of society. Pablo had become something of a local hero, the boy who helped the Angel of Death save the town. Sarah's ranch flourished under the care of many hands. Those who had helped her trap Carson and Riley refused payment, saying justice had been reward enough. But she found ways to repay their loyalty, teaching young Pablo to shoot, helping Maria's family claim land of their own. Buffalo Bill sent another letter, offering twice his usual fee for a return performance. Sarah posted her response where everyone could see it. The Angel of Death has given her final show, but she's found a better stage, protecting the people and land she loves. Thunder grazed contentedly in his corral, home at last, just like his mistress. Dawn found Sarah at her morning ritual, cleaning her father's Winchester with the same care she'd always shown. But now, the routine wasn't about remembering, it was about being ready to protect what mattered. Thomas's journal lay open. On her table, his last entry facing up. My wife carries a gift far greater than her aim. She sees the truth in people, knows when to show mercy and when to stand firm. The Angel of Death was never about the killing, it was about justice. Outside, Thunder nickered a greeting as young Billy Jenkins arrived for his shooting lesson. Sarah smiled, remembering Thomas's words. The legend of the Angel of Death had grown larger since Carson's defeat, but the truth was simpler. Sometimes, the deadliest shot wasn't the one you took, but the one you held in reserve. She stepped onto her porch into the morning light. The Winchester was clean, her skills were sharp, and her home was safe. Some performances never really end. They just find a different stage.